we start all of our scientific discovery, all of our clinical discovery with our early stage companies. So they are so important for everything that we're doing across all of our clinical indications. But then we have the long journey to get them to market, and now we have market. And so we're gonna really change gears right now and start talking about where we are today with global precision medicine, how we're thinking about those therapies and those diagnostics and all of that supportive infrastructure that gets those very early stage fabulous discoveries to our patients worldwide. And so today, I am joined by an incredible group of people I've spent a lot of time with over the past career, really working in this space. And whether or not it's early stage, another kind of early stage therapeutics types of companies, to our reference labs, to our diagnostics companies, to our pharmaceutical companies, each one of these executives here has a different perspective. When I've been working with each and every one of them, they spend time really thinking about where they've been and all of the experience that they've been in and all the experience that they have today. And just overall, from a KPMG perspective, as we deal with global precision medicine, we're thinking about it from an ecosystem approach. We're really looking at everybody, again, trusting each other, collaborating with each other. And it's a little bit of a tale of two cities right now. As we hit the pandemic, we were one place in precision medicine. We thought we were doing pretty well. We had come up with local approaches, global vision, local realities. We had figured out the supply chain. We had started to kit in different ways. We had really worked through a lot of different dynamics with our reference labs. We had worked through a lot of different dynamics, region by region, but all rolling up to a fabulous global vision. We thought that we really had it covered, or at least we were starting to. And then the pandemic hit. The regions all closed down, and we simultaneously had a diagnostic slammed across every single newsreel. And everybody knows, even my kids know, all right, well, where's that point of care test? What are we doing with antibodies? All of that. It all became jargon to everybody, but yet we lost so much ground with the connectivity of going from a global vision to a local reality. And so today, what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time really talking about that. And from my perspective at KPMG, we spend all of our time thinking about the deals, the strategy, and the implementation of everything that we're going to be talking about today. And this group really spends the time making it happen and working through it. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to each one of my panelists to describe who they are and why they're here today. And then we'll get into the discussion. Okay, so Gitte, we'll start with you.
Yeah, my name is Gitte Petersen. I'm Danish. So I have kind of two perspectives of healthcare systems. One that is incredibly capable of delivering the same care to everyone, and one that is not so good at that, but very good at delivering exceptional care to some. And I think that informs me a lot about where I think we need to go. Fundamentally, there's one unifying parameter, which is that, and I think the other panel members can support that, we're not financially supporting diagnostics as we are doing drugs. Mm-hmm. And that needs to change, because diagnostics are so important in navigating into the right treatment and following up. And there's two things every cancer patient wants to know. Is this treatment gonna help me? And will the cancer come back? And to blow a little air here, it's not enough with one biomarker, because we tried that for decades. And one biomarker, the best it does is enrich the patient populations of responders to 50% in early stage and 20% in late stage. Mm-hmm. We have reduced the complexity of biology to one molecule and one target, and biology is much more complex. So I'm here to advocate for much more data, and the way we, as Genomic Expression, have addressed that is by validating RNA sequencing, enabling it in real clinical samples, and then throwing machine learning after it. So we pioneers in that space. We are interested in partnering and finding ways to accelerating bringing that to market. And this is why. If we have 10,000 diseases for which there is no cure. If we develop drugs with the same speed as we have done historically, it would take us 200 years. So we need to change the speed. And I'm actually super inspired of what the healthcare industry have done over the pandemic. Taking several drugs from zero to approval in 12 months. Why can't we do that in other indications as well? Well, the answer is we can. So that's my pitch.
It's a good start. Excellent. Very good. All right.
Thank you.
And Mark, for you.
Hi, everyone. Kristin, thanks for having us here for this panel. My name is Mark Stapley. I'm the CEO of Veracyte, a diagnostics company. I'll talk about Veracyte in a moment. Just a little bit about my career. Prior to being the CEO of Veracyte, I was leading a population genomics company called Helix that became one of the largest COVID testing labs in the country. Before that, I worked at a really small sequencing company called Illumina. And before that, I was with Pfizer in New York. So I've been around this industry now for over a decade and had some really amazing companies that I've worked with. Veracyte's vision is to transform cancer care for patients all over the world. We were formed in 2008, so we're 15 years old. We have over 800 incredible employees based in San Francisco, San Diego, Marseille, France, and all around the country and the world, including Europe, focused on delivering tests to patients in over 35 countries. So far, we've helped over 350,000 patients. We believe, and you've used this word, exceptional, we believe that exceptional cancer care begins with exceptional diagnostics, and our tests empower physicians with the high-value insights that they need to guide and assure patients at pivotal moments in the race to diagnose and treat cancer. And so it's a really important what we do, and that's what our team is aligned behind. We have half a dozen or more tests. We have tests in prostate, thyroid cancer, lung, breast cancer. We're launching tests all around the world, as I mentioned, over 35 countries. And we strongly believe that patients need to have access to these tests globally. I agree with you. It is very difficult to get our tests reimbursed and commercialized, and it's an uphill battle, and that is the fight we have to fight. Meanwhile, patients who should be getting molecular diagnostics aren't getting them. Greatest example of what you said, that the diagnostics really matter. If you think about COVID testing, and I was on the kind of not quite the front line that our health system workers were on, but supporting the front line as we launched our COVID test at Helix. The diagnosis, and contact tracing changed the trajectory of the dynamic of the pandemic at that time. And so if that didn't tell us how much diagnosis really matters, then I don't know what does.
Excellent. Nicole Lambert, Chief Operating Officer at Myriad Genetics. I started out my career as a customer of Myriad's. I was a genetic counselor, and at the time, it was BRCA 1 and 2 testing, and you had to go to MD Anderson or Sloan Kettering and see a genetic counselor for 2 hours to get the testing. And so I've seen that evolution from the test being, something that was done for mostly women who were looking to understand their risk. They had a family history, they were worried about risk, and so you had a lot of time. I mean, turnaround time was 5 weeks. It was very difficult to get insurance coverage. Patients often paid out of pocket, or they got tested anonymously because they didn't want their insurance company to know. And you fast forward several years, we're now in a place where that same testing and really, an evolution of that testing, it's what's used for PARP inhibitors for a companion diagnostic indication. It was several years ago that PARP inhibitors were being developed, and they largely, didn't work in the vast populations. And so many people in the pharmaceutical industry had sort of written them off and had canceled additional development of PARP inhibitors. We reached out to some of the leading pharmaceutical companies that were developing them and said, hey, let's see if we can resurrect this trial. Let's see if we can identify the patients that will respond to a PARP inhibitor, because we knew what those pathways were. We knew that BRCA1 and 2 testing would be critical in identifying responders. And so in looking back at those trials and in testing those patients in that cohort, we actually were able to resurrect that entire class of drugs, which, if you think about PARP inhibitors and what they have done for the trajectory of ovarian cancer and now moving into other indications, pancreatic, breast, prostate, and where those things will go, and that's a whole class of drugs that was almost shelved. And so it was really, really impactful to see what diagnostics can do, not just at a point of care, but also for the entire field and for our ability to cure cancer in the end. So it's been a really long journey. We learned a lot, and so I'm happy to share some lessons learned, but you really understand that it's not just about one player, it's about the entire ecosystem together, and that in order to make these things happen, diagnostic companies have to work with big pharma, but we also have to work with regulators, and we never had to work with the FDA before we were a companion diagnostic. We've got to work with payers. We've got to work with providers. Providers don't often understand what the value is or how to use it, or even just logistically, where do we send the tumor? How much tumor do you need? All of those things have to work together if we're really going to change the trajectory of medicine. I love that.
Great, thank you, and thank you again for the invitation. Let me add a little bit of Italian accent here. I'm working with my Jersey accent, but clearly there is some work to do there. So, Gabriele Allegri, I'm the Global Commercial Head for Precision Medicine for Janssen, pharmaceutical company at Johnson & Johnson. Question why I'm here and why precision medicine. Short story, precision medicine for me is the place to be. My working experience starts many years ago. I was working in startup company in data field, big data, moving consulting, and then since 15 years I'm in Johnson & Johnson. And more than 1 year ago I chose to move across Atlantic, move after the pandemic, from Italy to US. I moved the family there, and for one reason, for precision medicine. Why that? Let me give you two numbers here. If you look at the FDA all drug approved in the last year, on average between 30 to 45% of all approved FDA drugs are precision medicine enabled drugs. So it's clearly, it's not anymore a niche, it's a big proportion of the healthcare. But more interesting, if you look at the all the late stage development studies, 60% of all those assets are precision medicine enabled. So I think precision medicine is here to stay, and there is a lot of shaping that needs to happen. I think it's Gary Pisano, that is a professor at Harvard Business School, said he was talking about innovation and was making different type of, analyzing different type of innovation. When it comes to precision medicine, he referred precision medicine as an architectural type of innovation. Why? Because it requires new competencies and new go-to-market model. And for pharma is a big shift. If you are sitting in many companies are very traditional type of go-to-market model, working and competing in a precision medicine environment require a different mentality, different go-to-market model. So I think it's the new frontier of the healthcare, and it's a fantastic place where to be. So why I'm here? Because I think this is really the place where we should be.
Fantastic. And you know, all of you know this group of people, and you know that they've really had to transform their businesses in precision medicine as precision medicine continues to move forward. And it is very, very difficult. You have no ability to just sort of sit back and let the business run. It just doesn't happen because the science is moving too fast, the clinical's moving too fast, patients are dying, we need to really move forward with it. I've worked with each one of you on pieces of those transformations throughout many years, right? And so, you know, if you think about it, you know, Mark, you know, 3 big deals, boom, 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 and then having to integrate those and work through those while also being able to do that globally. Nicole, same with you, divestitures, and then bringing and really transforming Myriad's business as it moved into the next frontier across international. Gabriele, it's a constant journey in Janssen of trying to make sure that all of the data is incorporated, all of the global is incorporated, everything that's going through. And Kite, as you continue to transform your business, it's changing, right? And so as we look at that, I'd love for you each to, all of you are transforming your businesses in different ways as well. I'd like to pick the challenge that you had. Just pick one. We know there's many, but pick one. And Nicole, I'm going to start with you. As you think about the last year and a half, and then as you think of the next 6 months, what was the biggest challenge that you encountered as you were, working through all of the operations of Myriad? And what would be the advice that you would have as you were kind of going through that challenge, and how is it coloring what you're going to be doing in the future?
Boy, I could take the whole rest of that.
Take like 3 bullets, and then we'll do each one.
But I'll reference the one that you talked about earlier in the introduction. So we went through a transformation and some divestitures and some refocusing. So essentially, as the BRCA patents were expiring, we had diversified our business quite a bit to be able to continue to generate the revenues that we were generating previously, and trying to understand a new way to operate in the model. We had a CEO that really had diversified the business quite a bit into multiple business units. We went into dermatology, we went into autoimmune, we went into a more research sector-based business, we went into urology, we went into all these different specialties, and you just can't be successful across that broad range of specialties, with the operating revenue that we were generating. And so we had a new CEO come in, so there's disruption in the organization just because of that. And then also you have really a very disciplined CEO, experienced CEO that came in and said, okay, we need to double down on the core, right? Which is, something I think everyone learns in business school, but it's harder to do sometimes than to listen to a lecture about it. And so we divested some of these extra businesses that we had gone into that probably didn't make a lot of sense for us. And so now we have really doubled down in our core areas of oncology, women's health, and mental health. And now what we're looking at is, what else do we put in those channels? How do we make those channels as profitable as possible? And also, how do we get as close to those customers as possible? So we recently did an acquisition of Gateway Genomics, which seemed odd. I mean, we were known to be an oncology company. Gateway Genomics is a gender reveal test, right? What does that have to do with us? But what that has to do is that's really wrapping around that women's health customer. So Kristin had really worked with us on establishing that vision of a women's health care business that had a relationship with a patient from age 25 to 55. And so, getting to that patient really early in their journey, grabbing them on Amazon, bringing them into our ecosystem, and then having a relationship with them throughout prenatal testing, throughout carrier screening, throughout postpartum depression, breast cancer risk, breast cancer and ovarian cancer treatment selection. You see that whole journey start to come together.
And it's really that full continuum approach. A number of people always ask about that. Oh, that sounds too hard. How can you really capture a woman from birth to death? How do you really think about that? Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. But I think that what you've been able to do is really pick very carefully the partners and the acquisitions that you've chosen to be able to do that, but do that efficiently as well, without having to buy up companies or partner with companies that end up being a lot of work for you, a lot of work for your management team, but aren't getting you what you need. Right?
Yeah.
And Mark, how have you been thinking about it as you've wandered through this as well?
Well, 2 years ago, so, this time in 2021, JP Morgan did we even have it? It wasn't in person, was it?
It was in virtual.
At this time 2 years ago, Veracyte was a very different company than it is today. We were just really based in San Francisco. Our biggest and really only revenue driving product at that time was our Afirma test for thyroid cancer. We had about 250-ish employees. Then, as you mentioned, Kristin, as you well know, we then acquired Decipher with their urology franchise, prostate, bladder, etc. And then we acquired HalioDx in France, which gave us our manufacturing and IVD development and IVDR capabilities over in Europe. And we put those 3 companies together in the space of about 6 months. Right in the midst of that, we changed CEO, and the whole management team pretty much changed completely as well. I joined the company the day we announced the France acquisition. And then I had to rebuild the leadership team almost from scratch in terms of, transforming the company for that 800-person, multiple country, nine time zone dynamic that you have to deal with in a global organization. At the same time as doing what you did, Nicole, is like kind of looking at the portfolio of products, the investments, and focusing on the things that are going to drive the best outcomes while trying to very quickly get new products in the market to help patients. And so, one of the things I talk about at Veracyte is pace and urgency. I said, I mentioned the words, the race to diagnose and treat cancer. It is a race. Patients don't have time, so we don't have time. And so I always tell people, especially when I'm interviewing, is one of the things you're going to find if you come to Veracyte, it's a fast-paced organization because it has to be, because we're mission-driven. And so at the same time, we've had to, also transform the culture of the company as well, and take these 3 separate cultures and try and create one cohesive culture. Our work isn't done, but we're making great progress, and I'm looking forward to doing more of that in 23.
Would you say it's also, I think a number of companies forget that change management, the culture change. Yeah. People love to talk about people, but don't really internalize when you have 3 companies coming in, you have a completely different set of cultures, you have cross-border relationships, and you're doing this all during COVID, when you really can't actually, a virtual data room really actually is a virtual data room.
Right.
So, and would you say that, even as you continue to move forward, how has that change management and organizational change really affected the way you're even leading?
It affects it a lot. I mean, I'm a big believer in change management, which, is just, to me, is another way of engaging stakeholders early and often, communicating effectively and communicating frequently and keeping everybody along on the journey. You've got to paint the vision so they can see where you're going and buy in, right? Not everybody's going to buy in. I mean, you accept that and you move on. It's a little bit like, you might fail fast in developing a new product. It's no different in change management in terms of transforming an organization. But if you do it well, most people are on board, and then they can see where you're trying to get the organization to be, and then if you got the right folks, they'll help you get there. So yeah, it's been a really key part of it. Where I've seen things kind of misstep and go wrong, it always goes back to that lack of early thinking about change management and how the change affects the individual, which really you have to get to precision transformation. If you like, you got to get to how it affects every single person in their day-to-day job.
I love that. Dave, when you think about your company, it's a little bit of a different type of scale, right? And
absolutely.
So talk a little bit about your biggest challenge over the past year and how you're thinking about changing in the future.
Right. So walking in the footsteps of some giants here, but also taking some learning lessons, in particularly around the focus and also the challenge of getting payer support. And to augment our launch risk, we're really focusing on partnering with biotech and pharma companies around reducing their clinical risk. And I know the 30% is a good number, but it's not good enough. And it's still based mostly on single biomarkers. I was at the Personalized Medicine Coalition's yearly meeting last year, and it's a little bit more of the same. So I'm an advocate for fast change, not relying on single biomarkers. Just relying on one can reduce the risk and cost of a clinical study in cancer from 1.3 billion to 300 million. So why wouldn't you do that? And what if you could incorporate more than one biomarker and do an algorithm? And we know RNA is first of all underutilized, except from Veracyte.
Thank you.
But it's a phenotype of the tissue or the person. It captures much more information and is, by the way, dynamic, which is one of the challenges. So I'm a firm believer that the biotech industry as an industry have always been incredibly good at partnering around capabilities. And I had some very interesting meetings during my the first 2 short days, and actually 2 of them was other diagnostic companies that thought maybe we could help them out. And so we are humbled by the challenge of taking the next step to commercialize. We know we can assist patients repurposing existing drugs on an individual patient basis. We have 5 hits on gold. And why do we need more than one? Well, because 50% response rate in an early stage, 20% in late stage, simply not enough with one. And we also believe that most successes comes from combinatorial approaches. And for pharma, we can design those, or biotech companies, in a rational way using expression biomarkers. And the last thing I would say, and that's back to some of my early statements, that patients can't wait, and we all getting older. 1 out of 2 will die from cancer in this room. It's a big number. We have rare cancers is still a very unserved segment. And if we can do this on breast and ovarian and some of the cancers we have modeled, then certainly we can do it in rare cancers as well. So we just got a grant to prove that and validate it. And my ambition is really to create a collaboration. If anybody's interested, please tap me. And type of a consortium, and we have a lot of experience with participating in those, where we repurpose existing drugs for rare cancers. So that's my next project, and my next big thing, because I think we are not, diagnostics is not in a vacuum. There's a drug, and it's a partnership. There's a diagnostic and then a drug. I don't own the drug. I don't develop the drug. I partner.
And you partner through all the different parts of, everywhere from very early stage all the way to late stage. And one of the reasons why Geet is on this panel is specifically because of that. You can't, you're in the olden days, you used to be able to get the drug out to launch and it's all right. You deal with the commercialization, the sales force does its thing. We can't do that anymore. And in fact, we have to be evaluating early stage now and then coming back around again. And the group that knows this better than anybody, I think, is Gabriele's group at Janssen, because from what you're doing at JLabs to what you're doing all the way through your life cycle, you're constantly looking at new technologies as you're also developing your launch strategies and coming back around again and working with all these partners. So can you tell us, with your challenge over the past year, what has it really been? Has it, and how do you think about it from that whole ecosystem approach? Because that's what you have to do as you're launching.
Exactly. And a few days ago, my daughter asked me what you exactly do as a job. So precision medicine. So I really tried to enter in the genomic type, but it was too much. She's 11 years old, so I tried to simplify, and I go back to a keyword: change management. When you're working and you do operate in a precision medicine environment, change management is a keyword and a recurring theme that is going around. From the development side, a lot of time, even before there were the section before us, there were discussions regarding single assets versus platform. When you come to precision medicine, yes, we are very much focused on a single asset, but if you really want to have a change, you need to have an above brand perspective. And this is where multiple genomic testing comes together, more than one biomarker, different technology. So it's a change management that needs to happen since the early stage. Then when it comes to commercialization, I mean, it is where another big change management needs to happen, because US is a fantastic country, but very diverse from Latin, very diverse from Europe, from Japan. Yes. And when you interact with the local team, go-to-market model is very different. It's nice to have a slide which this is the strategy, but when you go in implementation, this is where the challenge comes. So it's a lot of change management that needs to happen there. And the second keyword that for me is fundamental is the partnership. I think if you really want to be successful in a precision medicine environment, you need to realize that you cannot do everything by yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to partner. To partner with who? I mean, let's start from the diagnostic company. This is where there are a lot of consortium initiative where we sit together and we try to influence and lobby with payer, with decision maker, making sure that enough financing is there to have the right testing available all around the globe. there is one number that for me is still astonishing, that is 50% of the patients around the world still do not have access to the most advanced precision medicine drug. Why? Because the test is not available. Yeah. Technology is there. The drug is there, is available. 50% of those patients, because the test is not reimbursed, is not available, any reason, on average, this is there. And how can we solve this problem? Huge one. I think it's change management, working together, partnering together with patient advocacy group, you name it. This is where we really, but it's a new go-to-market model. Traditional pharma company, it is also between pharma company. I think there's a great opportunity there to partner. And it's not business as usual. If you were working in a more traditional pharma company, you are more in the competition mode there. You're not really looking at opportunities for synergy, but in precision medicine field, it is a big change. So for me, the biggest challenge is external and internal change management, because this is the key word to be successful here. We need, if you really aim at a healthier, better healthcare, we need to work all together in the same direction. I know that's easy to say, but a lot of time we focus on the single asset aspect, and then it is where we fall apart, we go in different direction, and we are not able to synergize and create the critical mass that we require to make these important changes in the healthcare sector.
Yeah, and Mark, when you think about this too, from a company that has now kitting ability, has biopharma services ability, has overall genetic testing ability, how do you think of exactly what Gabriele is just saying on this whole idea of change management, thinking about it globally and working through that?
It's funny, well, not funny, it's actually troubling, the statistic you mentioned around the availability of drugs globally. And if I use our Decipher prostate test as an example, you know, molecular diagnostics in prostate cancer has been around for quite some time. Both of our companies have been involved in this for a number of years. And, you know, Decipher prostate has been in 70 publications, clinical validity and clinical utility publications. It's in guidelines. It's got NCCN level 1 guidance. Yet molecular diagnostics in prostate cancer is being used about 1 in 4 times when it should be. So 75% of patients with prostate cancer are not getting a molecular diagnostic, and they should be. All right, so that, you know, you got to figure out how to, and that's just in the US, by the way. It's worse than that outside the US. So you got to think about how to, you know, get that access out there. And I think just getting reimbursement is one big hurdle, and you have to go country by country outside the US, and we all know there's a lot of hurdles you have to go through in the US, even with that level of publication. And then, once you've got reimbursement, you're still not there. Then you've got to go physician by physician and drive adoption. Just because it's paid for doesn't mean a physician's going to use it. And so there's a lot of blocking and tackling involved in getting a test adopted. If you think about a Afirma that's been on the market for 11 years, it's got insurance coverage for, you know, almost the entire US population, and that market's only 50% penetrated with molecular diagnostics. Again, patients with thyroid cancer, one of them is getting a test, the other one is not. And so that's got to change, and that it takes a long time.
So, fun fact, my mom was a politician and my dad a scientist, and what do you get when you marry a politician with a scientist? A very opinionated scientist. And so I've been advising the Danish government. Denmark have very early on taken and invested in precision medicine. Now I'm also advising the European Commission as a board member in ICEA, which is advising on evidence-based investment and innovation policies. There's a great deal of interest in Europe to improve cancer care. I just want to share that. But the question is how? And one of the answers to that question coming from me is that we really need to reimburse diagnostics. And we need to take a much more proactive approach also to collaborate across borders around personalized medicine and implementation of that. There's an interest in doing that. There is an interest. Right now there's a war, so it's a little noisy. But there is an interest, in particular in cancer. Yeah.
And Nicole, as you think about this too, there's ways to do a lot internationally, but you can spend a lot of money doing it with no return. And what we've seen as we worked across our pharmaceutical, our diagnostics companies, our reference labs, we had almost a ballooning of trying to get everywhere possible, even our health systems. We work with a number of health systems, and those biggest health systems that want to have satellite locations, whether they be in Dubai or in China or something like that. You want to be able to create labs or create diagnostic ability, but it ends up being very expensive. So, Nicole, can you tell us a little bit about the discipline that you need and how you actually do that from a company perspective as you're trying to expand internationally?
We learned a lot of lessons. Mistakes were made. No, but I think that the lesson we learned is, we tried to be everything to everyone, and just didn't have a clear focused strategy in the early days, right? Of which products, which markets, where are you going to have direct operations, where are you going to have distributors, what is the regulatory environment, what is the reimbursement environment. Some countries require in-country testing, whether that is you build your own direct lab or whether that is you have a collaborator or a strategic partner, a satellite lab of the Myriad lab in Copenhagen or somewhere else, right? And so that, I think...
We can talk about that.
Yeah, we do have a satellite lab in Copenhagen. Yes. That I think was the biggest lesson for us, is we went in with a very direct approach like you might in the U.S. And I would say in hindsight, we really, are doing much better in the places where, we had collaborators, satellite labs, distributors, and those things to establish the market, the product, the clinical utility. For instance, our prostate cancer test is used very differently in the UK versus the US, just because the way that prostate cancer is treated in the UK versus the US is very, very different. So, it's even if you decide to sell the same product in a different market, you can come up with a completely different, clinical indication, as well as, what is the reimbursement dossier, et cetera, in those markets. So my lesson learned or advice would be kind of, start out small, get a beachhead, and then build from there. Whereas if you look at, the way that we went into Japan, we have a distributor relationship. The testing is done in Salt Lake City, but is, given back to the Japanese patients and physicians, interpreted there, et cetera. It's just a much better model. The regulatory and reimbursement environment is very good there, and so we've been able to run a very profitable business there, versus when I think about some of the earlier mistakes that we made in Europe, where it is often, very expensive, and you just have to sort of meet each market where it is and have a well thought out strategy before you start constructing brick and mortar labs in Germany, right?
And I think we've seen the flexibility and the adaptability that you've all had to have to be in this environment, not only through COVID, but actually the new frontier. And so we're going to bring this panel home talking about new technology, new frontier. And so KPMG and our precision medicine practice, we have a proprietary database that tracks enabling technologies and diagnostics, about 15 different countries, and we do it specifically for this region. Every region is a little bit different, and it might be that they, you look at liquid biopsy as an example. Looking at those stats today over the past couple of years, almost every one of our 15 different countries want to use liquid biopsy. They want to bring it, so we do it from both the clinical perspective and the laboratorian perspective. Both sides want that in their regions. Very limited uptake so far. And why? Because of all sorts of regulatory and reimbursement issues. It's not necessarily, it's really more that access potential of being, in one country, they consistently say, we would love to use it, but if we use it and that's our one test that we get reimbursed and we don't get all the data that we need, we're done. And we can't do any more for the patient. It's a glitch almost. So as all of you think about this, and I'm going to start with Gabriele and then come this way around, how do you think of incorporating new technologies and bringing that home in the next couple of years of precision medicine?
Yeah, it's good. I see the big transformation there, so let me put a little bit of perspective. I see on one side the proliferation of this precision medicine outside oncology. Here I think we have very much focus on oncology, but I go back to the 60% of the drug that are in late stage development is much more than oncology. Oncology is leading the way, setting the stage, but rare disease is coming there, immunology diseases are coming there. So I think what we're talking about here is really something for the entire ecosystem, and all the genetic data is going to be a key component of the entire journey. So where I see the evolution, I see a couple of trends here. On one side, because of genetic testing is rapidly evolving, the usage in the clinical practice is astronomically growing, which is great. Not enough, but still a good step. I see probably on one side the cost of this technology going down, so more availability in some countries, so more opportunity to have it more, and then more data available. So for me, the new technology, the new frontier of discussion need to be on the data side, because genetic test for me is a data at the end of the day. How we can incorporate this data with the rest of the data lake of data that we can collect from clinical trial, early development to real world evidence. How we can making sure that then we can feed back to a couple of initiatives and making sure that we repurpose maybe some of the drug for existing patients. How we can really have a potential ecosystem. Easy to say, there are a lot of data privacy consideration that need to happen, and country by country, region by region, the situation is very different. But I see the potentiality, and I really see that precision medicine, if we're able to really incorporate this part of technology in our thinking and our way we operate, we can really make the huge difference in that care sector.
Thank you. Nicole, what do you think?
I would say two things. I think one, using technology to better the patient and provider experience. I mean, if it's not easy to get a precision medicine test, no one's going to get one, right? And so how do we make it that much easier for patients to understand, what they're going to owe at the end of the process, or a provider to order through their EMR, or whatever that is, to just make it easy and fast for patients to get results in their hands. That's the first thing. The second thing I think is on automating, using technology to automate our processes and bringing costs down. Because as our costs come down, we can do two things. We can reinvest in additional research and development, developing new tests, and we can start making the testing more affordable and giving access to more patients around the world.
Awesome.
I mean, a similar thing, but I love the way that our startup culture and funding structure works here in the US, where we can fund great innovation, and it's worked really well in tech, and it's working in healthcare. But when you've got so many companies that can't make money in healthcare and can't get products reimbursed, that will stifle innovation. It's the kind of thing where we really need to reduce some of the barriers to entry here in our industry in particular, and help drive new innovative products to the market. At Veracyte, we've developed a simple nasal swab test that can be used for lung cancer. I mean, just think about that in terms of a non-invasive cancer diagnostic. But again, the hurdles you have to go through with a breakthrough technology like that are significant. And there are so many people. We all know lung cancer is one of the leading causes of death. So there's so many people that could benefit from access to that technology.
Love that. Last one?
Yeah, I agree with all of you. Technology is where the rubber hits the ground. I have one of my slides. I have, your EMR data, your clinical data, even your patient data hits the genomic data, and sparkles comes out. So that's what we need to enable. And again, throwing instead of doing a very hypothesis-driven ideas about how the complex biology works, just throw data at machine learning. Most pharma companies won't have enough data to do that, because they know only from their own clinical studies. That's sharing is not really always possible. So we're really down to systems, healthcare systems, where that's possible. We tackled a couple of other problems with delivering data to patients. And we had to do that during COVID, and we used saliva as a specimen, because it was insane that people had to get out of bed, stand in a line, and get poked in the back of their head. And we collaborated with Yale Saliva Direct to prove that that was just as accurate as the NP swab. And when we did that, it was very clear that doctors pre-pandemic would like to call the patients up with the results. Forget about that, because they would sit on the phone. Would never be done. So we built this back-end infrastructure from order all the way through. So the other thing, when is our results coming? There's a dashboard. You can see it. So, you know. Yeah. So everything.
I just whispered to her, we're out of time. The idea, though, is that
You get
this
the
is
data at the same
innovation.
time.
Yes, you get the data at the same time, and it's constantly innovating. Thank you for that. Look, at the end of the day, flexibility, adaptability, constantly bringing in new technology, new ways of thinking, and collaboration. And I think that is, when we look at that next couple of years of precision medicine, we have to do it. It's not a question, right? We have to be able to all work together to use each other. You know, in my opening remarks today, as we started this off, we said we've all been in this space for a long time, anywhere between 10 to 30 years, sometimes even more, right? It depends on where we are in our journeys. And I think that we can all use each other to really help with this and continue to move forward. So without further ado, thank you so much for all the listening on that side. Thank you to my panelists. Awesome job.